Hi, I'm Barbie Flanagan. Welcome to True Crime Terror Tales. Today we are going to be talking about the Chicago Ripper crew. I first learned about this story about 20 years ago when I was a reporter in Southern Illinois at WPSD. My news director told me that I needed to get an interview with the governor who was coming down to Southern Illinois, and I needed to ask him about Andrew Kokorales, who was going to be executed. I had no idea who this guy was. So I caught the governor and I said, hey, I know you're talking about moratoriums. Are you going to put the moratorium in place, or is Andrew Kokorales going to be killed? And the governor said, we'll talk about the moratorium later. All I know is that man is going to die. After I did some research into the Ripper crew, I understood why he was so adamant. This is the worst story I've ever heard in my life. I remember it 20 years later. I got the true crime novel Deadly Thrills and read it. It just was a lot. So if you are sensitive to murder, Satanism, cannibalism, sexual assault, this is not the story for you. It's a very, very rough story. I felt that it needed to be told because women need to be aware that these type of monsters are out there and you need to protect yourself. In fact, one of these monsters is out walking free. In 1981 and 1982, a paralyzing fear covered the Chicagoland area. Someone was killing women, the bodies dumped, jewelry and money left on the victims. Robbery was not the motive.
Several of them were beaten. Their faces were beaten desperately, terribly.
J. Slade Fletcher, a former Chicago police officer, wrote the true crime novel Deadly Thrills about the 1980s killing spree. The killer severely beat, tortured, and sexually assaulted the women. Then he did the unthinkable.
But in every case, every single one of them, their breasts had been slashed, and this was no sort of surgical type procedure, and in most of the cases it was not post-mortem. The women were still alive.
You could be a prostitute, a working woman, just a girl out to the movies, day or night, in the city, in the suburbs. You were a victim of opportunity.
The killers were eventually captured and dubbed the Chicago Ripper crew because their crimes were similar to the notorious Jack the Ripper. 29-year-old Robin Gett was the leader. He was married with 3 children and lived in this house in Chicago.
We knew he was a little nuts, but we didn't suspect he would do anything like this.
It's not the same person that was here. Okay, it's like 2 different people.
Gett was an electrical engineer and a handyman. At one point, he'd worked with serial killer John Wayne Gacy in construction. 21-year-old Edward Spreitzer told police that Gett was his employer and leader of the Ripper crew. Gett had a dark, evil side. He was a Satanist, and his attic was a devil-worshipping chapel. Per Gett's orders, Spreitzer and brothers 21-year-old Thomas and 19-year-old Andrew Kokorales kidnapped women and brought them to Gett's attic or motel. They gang raped and severely beat the victims. And then the unimaginable horrors began. Gett removed the victim's left breast with a knife or piano wire. Then the men had sex with a chest wound.
They would then masturbate into this breast and then cut it into pieces and eat it.
It all started in May of 1981 when a manager called police to the Rip Van Winkle motel due to an intense foul odor. They found the decomposing body of 28-year-old Linda Sutton, a mother of 2. Someone had dumped her in a field behind the motel. She wore a sweater, no pants, underwear pulled down to her thighs. Her hands were handcuffed behind her back and a rag stuffed into her mouth. $17 was tucked in her sock, something sex workers typically did. Investigators used dental records to identify Sutton. An autopsy revealed she'd been beaten, sodomized, and violated with a bottle. Sutton had slash marks on her body. Her breasts had been crudely cut off. 21-year-old Lorraine Borowski, known as Lori, disappeared as she headed to work at a nearby real estate office in Elmhurst. Her 14-year-old brother had offered to walk with her, but she said she'd be okay. Lori never made it inside the office. When the manager arrived, he found her keys, makeup, and her heels near the office door. A witness told police that they noticed a reddish-orange van in the parking lot that morning. This was their only lead. and the search for Lori continued.
At this point, we're going on the assumption that she was abducted. There's no indication in our investigation for any reason for her to be missing at this point, other than by some type of means beyond her control.
Lori's remains were found 5 months later in a cemetery. An autopsy revealed she'd been raped, mutilated with an axe, and both breasts were amputated. Around 1 in the morning, 30-year-old Schumacher got into an argument while riding home from her family's restaurant. Her brother pulled over and left her on a highway in Hanover Park, expecting their parents to pick her up when they drove by. Her family never saw her again. 4 months later, Mock's body was found in a shallow grave about a mile away from the highway. It was badly decomposed. The autopsy showed the bones had nicks on them as if she'd been stabbed to death. Sex worker Angel York got into a reddish-orange van. She was beaten and brutally raped. The men forced York to cut into her left breast. Then they cut her breast off and had sex with the wound. They put duct tape on York's chest and threw her out of the moving van. She survived and reported the attack to police, but she couldn't provide many details. Some children found the mutilated body of 18-year-old Sandra Delaware, a sex worker. Her body was near the Chicago River. She'd been stabbed, strangled, and violated with a broken Coke bottle. Her left breast was amputated. She had been dead for only 5 hours when found. 30-year-old Rose Beck Davis had just left her marketing executive job when a deadly gang snatched her up on Lakeshore Drive. Her naked body was found in an alleyway. She'd been raped, stabbed, and strangled with a sock. Her breasts were mutilated and her face was destroyed by an axe, its wooden handle shoved into her private area. 18-year-old Beverly Washington was found near railroad tracks. She was bleeding and unconscious. When she came to in the hospital, she was on a ventilator, but managed to write down what happened. Washington had climbed inside a red van to turn a trick. She was forced to the back of the vehicle, handcuffed and drugged with pills. She was taken to a room where she was stabbed, beaten, and raped. A man removed her left breast with piano wire. She passed out from the pain. Washington had given detectives information they could use. She described the van in detail.
Between the front driver's seats and the rear of the van was a plywood partition.
Washington told police a roach clip with long blue and white feathers hung from the rearview mirror. She also gave a detailed description of her assailant. Police put out an alert for the red van. 10 days later, police spotted the vehicle. They pulled it over to find a very nervous driver, Edward Spreitzer. He said the van belonged to his boss, Robin Gett. Spreitzer took police to Gett, who denied any involvement. Investigators noticed Gett looked like the man Washington had described. They took him to the police station. A background check showed that Gett had previously been arrested for contributing to the sexual delinquency of a 14-year-old. Also, he had molested his sister as a teenager. Detectives took Gett to the hospital, where a terrified Washington positively identified him. They had their man. Detectives brought Spreitzer in for questioning. That's when the morbid confession rolled out. Spreitzer detailed how the gang raped and tortured Linda Sutton for 7 days at the motel before dumping her in the tall weeds to bleed to death. He went on to describe Gett's satanic rituals. He said Gett ordered them to commit numerous abductions and murders. He claimed the men were terrified of Gett. They believed he had supernatural powers. Authorities arrested Thomas and Andy Kokorales. They backed Spreitzer's confession, admitting to raping, torturing, and mutilating women. The reign of terror was over. Police had the Chicago Ripper crew in custody. They believed the satanic cult killed at least 18 victims. Spreitzer was convicted for the murders of Linda Sutton, Rose Beck Davis, Sandra Delaware, and Shu Mock, as well as the murder of Raphael Torrado. The Ripper crew had been hired to kill him. Spreitzer received the death penalty. In 2003, it was commuted to multiple life sentences, but he will die in prison. Thomas Kokorales initially confessed to several murders, but recanted his statements. He made a plea deal for the murder of Lloyd Borowski. A charge for Linda Sutton's murder was dropped. He received a 70-year sentence. In 2019, Cocorales was released to a halfway house in Aurora due to an old Illinois law called day for day. He only served half of his sentence. Cocorales insists he's innocent and refuses to talk with the Borowski family, saying that he feels sorry for them. He has to register as a sexual offender, but he doesn't have to abide by all the guidelines, such as staying a certain distance away from schools. Currently, this convicted sadistic rapist and murderer roams free. Robin Gett denied any connection to the murders. The other Ripper crew members still feared him. They recanted their statements about Gett and refused to testify against him. Forensic science wasn't available at the time, so police had no evidence. Gett pled guilty to the attack and attempted murder of Beverly Washington. He received a 120-year sentence. Gett's wife, children, and family maintained his innocence and stood by him. In 1999, Gett's then 18-year-old son, Donald, followed in his footsteps. Donald took part in a gang-related shooting. He received a 45-year prison sentence. Andrew Cocorales was 17 years old when he killed Linda Sutton. He went on to murder nearly 20 women by the time he was 19. On March 17, 1999, the state of Illinois executed 35-year-old Andrew Cocorales by lethal injection at the Tams Correctional Facility. He was the last person executed in Illinois. Andrew Cocorales did apologize to the families before he was executed. I had the opportunity to see the execution because I was a reporter in the area, and I chose not to. It was just too much for me. Robin Gett comes up for parole in 2042. He will be 89 years old. If you want to check out more about this story, the book Deadly Thrills is really, really good. I had the book for many, many years, and I believe I recently gave it away to the library. I can't find it. The book is expensive now. It's on Amazon for $43, but I tell you, it goes into details, and it's really, really good. Thanks for watching. I will see you next time.